So I would like to welcome both of you, Partha Prabhu and Utma Mataji, this morning. Please accept our humble obeisances to your lotus feet. Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation to speak with your audience. So we were asked to talk about overcoming challenges, and we'll begin by discussing normal, if you want to call it normal, challenges faced by grihasthas. And challenges are normal, they're to be expected. Challenges, when handled properly, they actually become catalysts and stimuluses for personal and spiritual growth, and also improving relationships. So challenges aren't something to be feared. Unfortunately, often couples have difficulty with challenges due to a lack of the ability to communicate and understand each other, and inability to express their needs to each other. And what happens if there's a lack of communication? You end up with a lack of a sense of connection over time. And then couples begin to develop some sense of resentment, and the internal problems tend to get magnified, and the challenges turn into problems and often into conflicts. Again, challenges and conflict are normal, but when even conflict, when it's dealt with constructively, non-confrontationally, with respect, the conflicts are reduced to challenges. And again, the challenges become catalysts for spiritual growth. So that's an important point to understand. Challenges aren't something to be feared. Often, actually, statistically, it's shown that couples generally tend to neglect their challenges. They turn into problems, they turn into conflicts, and often couples wait statistically as long as 6 years to seek help for the problems that end up growing. And that's unfortunate, because what happens is that sense of disconnect and unhappiness, it becomes normalized in the relationship. In our Vaishnava theology, that's what we refer to as conditioned life. We become conditioned by the lower modes of material nature. And as aspiring transcendentalists, spiritualists, bhakti yogis, we want to attempt to come to the mode of goodness. And there are ways in which we can learn to manage and deal with challenges and even conflicts within the mode of goodness. And so we would like to explore with you some things that can be done to enable all of you to deal with challenges in more constructive ways. One very common dynamic in relationships is often we hear that ladies, I think our audience here is all ladies, and we often hear ladies say, my husband, he never talks to me, he doesn't understand. Very, very common complaint. And male and females have very different psychology, psychophysical makeup, and women tend to be more emotive, men a little more rational, and often men have a difficulty in understanding the emotional sides of women. And how that actually manifests in a relationship often is that in the beginning of a relationship, things tend to go very smooth. And over time, you begin to discover some differences, and couples aren't able to really discuss and navigate those differences. And one of those differences is the difference between men's logical nature and the female's more emotional nature. And often women will approach their husband looking for simply some empathy. They're having some stress, some difficulty, and they just want a sympathetic, empathic ear to understand how they feel. However, due to men's logical natures, we tend to interpret that dialogue as a problem we can solve for the person we love the most, our dear wife. And we tend to offer a logical solution. And what happens next is that the woman, hearing that logical solution to her attempt to get some empathy, she becomes a little frustrated. And often it'll manifest as some look of dissatisfaction in her face, or maybe she might say, well, you don't understand me. And the man's thinking that, well, I understood what you said. You have that problem, and I know exactly how to fix it. And all you have to do is just follow what I tell you, and the problem will be solved. But for her, it's not a problem to solve. It's just she wants empathy. So the man doesn't get that, and the woman doesn't understand his logical nature. And so over time, that tends to become more and more of a repetitive pattern, that she tries to get some empathy from her husband. He tries to give a solution. She becomes frustrated. He becomes bewildered because he's doing his best out of love and it's failing. And actually, for a man, the greatest fear for men is the fear of inadequacy. And for a man to see his wife dissatisfied by his perceived attempts at solving her problems, that's actually very painful for men. And generally, men will do one of two things. One is they'll either withdraw into a shell, or they might become a little angry. When men withdraw, that triggers a very primal fear in women, which is the fear of isolation. And so that is very frightening for women when they're trying to approach their husband for some connection emotionally. He's withdrawing and she feels isolated. So the women will tend to pursue more to get that connection. They'll say, why don't you talk to me? Why don't you listen to me? You don't understand me. So she's attempting to connect. But actually what happens when she attempts to connect in that way, because it's coming across as a criticism, you don't understand, you never listen to me, it's very hard to respond to a criticism, extremely hard, especially for men, because the first thing we will feel when we're on the brunt end of a criticism is we'll have that feeling of inadequacy, which will make us withdraw.
So they're not understanding inadequacy. They feel inadequate, not adequate. There's a question. Is it? Oh,
okay.
They don't understand.
Inadequate. And so that's the psychologists actually refer to that as a pattern that develops called pursuit and withdrawal, that the woman is continually trying to pursue for some connection. The man, he's feeling inadequate every time he tries to offer solutions, so he withdraws. She pursues more, he withdraws more, and there becomes this increasing disconnect in relationships. And if that simple dynamic isn't properly understood and honored, it can actually be a precursor to separation or divorce.
Or great dissatisfaction.
Yeah, or living in a very dissatisfied relationship. So the remedial measure to that is, like one time that one lady, she said, we were talking to her and her husband, she said, my husband never speaks to me. So I asked her, I said, how long have you been married? She said, 15 years. So I said, if I take your words at face value, you've been married 15 years and he never spoke to you once, because you said he never talks to you. She said, no, that's not true. And so I said, well, what I'm hearing in your words, because women tend to use words like you never or you always, and those words are actually masking an inner pain, because it's very painful for them when they lose that sense of connection. So they're expressing the pain by criticizing, but that's not constructive. So to those kind of situations where we meet ladies in that situation, I just tell them it's important that you tell him what you need. You don't need a logical solution. You just need him to understand how you feel. And I tell him, express to him how that adds value to your life, when you can sense that he understands you. Tell him how that makes you feel loved and protected, because men, we can understand that. We can understand, okay, here's a problem you have. You need to be understood. Oh, okay, I get that. I don't have to solve your problem. A small thing, but if you approach it in the proper way, it unravels that dynamic. So that's a very, a crucial thing for relationships, is not to criticize, but to request compassionately what you need in the relationship, whether it's help around the house, or whether it's empathy, or whether whatever it is, to simply say, I have this need, X, Y, Z. I have this need, and if you could assist me in this way, you would feel, describe how you would
It
feel.
would make me feel
It would make you feel loved or protected or cared for or understood.
less stressed.
And that way the man can understand, oh, here's the way I can reciprocate with you. And that's one very small dynamic that helps get that channel of communication going. And especially too, even in couples are fighting about the in-laws, the kids' education, how to discipline kids, they're fighting about money. Those conversations will go much easier if you're able to establish those kind of lines of healthy communication. And so just that practicing that one simple skill of requesting and not complaining can help you and your husband or fiance or boyfriend get the confidence that you are actually able to have some healthy communication. And then from there, build that communication stronger in other areas.